Welcome back to another live stream. This is the Dan Norton Show of Saturday, June 21st, 2025, the day after the summer solstice. That is the longest day of the year, from sunrise to sunset. I used to study quite a bit of astronomy, so I learned about daylight saving time and how that works. So this is actually noon, the true noon. Uh, since we're currently in daylight savings time, 1 hour ahead, it's actually 12 p.m. Pacific time. But because of people think they're going to get more daylight if they move the clock ahead by an hour, it shows up as being 1 p.m. Pacific. But uh, I guess there's been some people arguing that we should get rid of daylight savings time. Um, I guess that'd be okay with me. Hi, Wade. I got our first chat of the day from South Africa, if I recall. It might be the furthest person away I've ever had on the chat. Wade called in a few shows ago. We talked about capitalism. And I welcome anyone to participate here. This is a show driven by topics that you all raise. So feel free to make comments, questions in the chat, or just say hi, like Wade did. And you can also call in. I have a phone number, or I have both a phone number and a link you can click, which is pinned in the chat. It's been a few shows since we had any callers, but I do welcome callers as well as chatters. So here on this show, I advocate for Ayn Rand's philosophy of objectivism, a philosophy of reason, egoism, and capitalism, as opposed to faith, altruism, and socialism, as I put in the title for today's show. Okay, so I see we just got a chat from Wade. Do you think the solar system was sphere? Maybe you mean spherical when it was forming and formed a disk over billions of years? Okay, that's a scientific question. And I don't have a view on that. I'm not a scientist. I've learned some about science and astronomy, but as to whether the solar system was a sphere when it was forming and formed a disk over billions of years, I don't know. From what I've read, the Earth is estimated to be about 4.6 billion years old. I don't know if that means that's the time at which it was formed from other matter that had coalesced. Um, Maybe there's no exact date you can put on that, but roughly speaking, at least, maybe that's what it means to say the Earth is 4.6 billion years old. And I guess maybe there's still some matter, like in the asteroid belt, that's still floating around. Maybe it used to be a wider belt, and some of that matter through gravitational forces uh, made some of it coalesce into the planets. Wade says, cool, thinking about the summer solstice. Yeah, I think it's an interesting time of year. Um, and it reminds me of the days when I would study astronomy a lot. Um, some of that was during grad school, actually. I was learning about the history of science because my dissertation was actually related to science in a way. It was called A Critique of the Scientific Case for Materialism. So allegedly, according to many philosophers, there is scientific support for the idea that the mind is material or physical. So I learned some about science, including astronomy, and I think at least little of that made it into my dissertation. Um, I guess there were, I'm trying to remember what it was. So maybe something about the stars and fire. Like what are the stars made of? Um, and maybe it had something to do with the fundamental elements, like there were the atomists, um, and Empedocles. I think he was one of the Greek philosophers. He had this idea that everything was made up of earth, air, fire, and water. Those were the fundamental building blocks. And then there were different views on what the fundamental building blocks of the universe were for the ancient Greeks. And I think one of the philosophers I was arguing against was maybe it was something like he was saying that it wasn't recognized that the stars are fundamentally different than the earthly phenomena, like the celestial phenomena and the earth, or the heavenly phenomena and the earthly phenomena are fundamentally different. But I think there actually was at least one Greek philosopher or scientist who thought the sun was just a ball of fire. And if that's true, then uh, that would lead you to think, well, it's not the case that everything in the heavens are fundamentally different because there's fire on Earth, but there's also fire up in the heavens if it's true that the sun is just a ball of fire. So I forget exactly like what the relevance of this was in my dissertation and how this issue came up, but I remember I think that maybe was the part of my study of astronomy that most directly made an appearance, even if only a small one, in my dissertation. RW is here. He says, "Do you think the universe is finite or infinite?" I think it's finite. I think everything is finite. I think it's to say it's infinite would be to say it has no limits. And I think that's a way of saying it has no identity. And according to Ayn Rand, everything has identity. Existence is identity. She says that in one place. To be is to be something in particular. Like if something doesn't have a particular identity, then it doesn't really exist at all. If I tell you I have something in my pocket and you start asking about its identity, like is it 5 inches long? Is it less than 5 inches long? I say nope. Is it more than 5 inches long? Nope. Is it equal to 5 inches? Nope. Well, how can that be? Is it brown? Is it black? Is it green? Nope, none of the above. If you don't ascribe any identity to something, then it's a way of saying, well, I have nothing in my pocket at all, right? It's got to have some specific nature. It can't just be nothing in particular. It has to be something in particular. And if it doesn't have a specific identity, then it doesn't exist. So I think there's a philosophical argument for concluding that the universe is finite because that's just a way of saying the universe has identity. If it didn't have identity, it wouldn't exist. Um, RW then says, follow up, do you think it's expanding if finite? Now that I think I'm not sure you could say because see if you say expanding, that raises the question relative to what? But there's nothing other than the universe relative to which the universe could expand because the universe is everything. That's how I think of it. You could also use the term existence. Maybe universe has more of a material or physical connotation to it, or if not denotation. Um, but I think of the universe as everything. So if you say everything is getting bigger, I mean, does that kind of imply there's a measuring stick of some sort outside the universe by reference to which you're judging that the universe as a whole is expanding. I'm not sure that's a coherent thought. Like, how could you make sense of that? You could say the distances between things that make up the universe is increasing or expanding. Like, you could say the distance between this star and this other star is expanding, and um, maybe the distance between all stars is expanding. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but I don't know that it makes sense to say that the universe as a whole is expanding. I don't know that you can measure the universe in that sort of way. I got Simon is here. Hello, Simon. Ayn Rand enthusiast. One, another new person. Hello. Um, yeah, it's a scientific question as to whether the distance between stars or galaxies is expanding, and I guess they can measure what they call the redshift or the blue shift to get an idea of that. And seems like many scientists think that the distances between stars is expanding, but I haven't researched it myself. I'm not a scientist. Um, and then RW says, apologies if my grammar is sometimes off. I often listen to the podcast when driving, and Siri doesn't dictate perfectly, and I can't edit on the road. Okay, no problem. Thanks for listening. Even if you're driving, I that's nice to hear like how people listen to my podcast. It's interesting. I can uh, visualize it in my mind. I do that too sometimes. I listen to podcasts while I'm driving. Just be safe. Um, oh, it's just like listening to the radio, I guess. It's just a more modern way of listening to stuff. Wade says a dark hole and its time dilation is quite crazy as well. Uh, Dark hole, is that like a black hole? It's so its gravity is so strong that it traps light in. Light cannot escape. And then time, you mentioned time dilation. Yeah, it's pretty wild stuff that uh, happens. I guess Einstein, I don't know if Einstein discovered time dilation, or at least theorized that it would exist. And then I guess at some point experiments were done that actually confirmed it. Like there were some atomic clocks, super precise clocks that were flown around the Earth or something in orbit. And then when they compared the time of the clocks that were stationary on Earth relative to the ones that were flying around in the orbit for a while, there was a difference that was measurable and that was predicted by the phenomenon of time dilation. And I guess that was part of the confirmation of Einstein's theory of relativity and time dilation, if I'm recalling this correctly. It's been a long time since I read about that. Simon says, hope you're doing well. Thanks. Appreciate it. Same to you. And thanks for any likes, by the way. I definitely appreciate that. Subscribes, shares, all of that. Let's see. Ayn Rand enthusiasts. Let me check something out here. Okay. Yeah, I think that might be a troll. I think that might actually be Darwin. So I can tell you something I learned about after the last show. So if you were here for the last show, there was a troll whose screen name was Papa. And it started out okay. He wanted to talk about Israel. And then not too long after that, he got very nasty, started using profanity, was hurling insults at me, and then I blocked him. Uh, and then after the show, I looked up the channel of Papa, and I saw that his YouTube account was created on the very same day as my stream. So this was Wednesday, June 18th, and his YouTube account was created on June 18th. So my guess as to what happened is this is someone who I blocked, who wanted to still be able to participate in my chat. And so he created a new account on the day of my last stream and uh, started participating, got nasty, and then got blocked. Now, who is this person? Well, he was saying, based on what he was saying, I think the highest probability is that it's Darwin coming in under an alt or a sock puppet. Is that what they call it? You create a new account pretending you're somebody else. But given the sorts of topics he was raising, like Israel, Darwin liked to talk about Israel a lot. And here he is again. Um, I'm assuming it's Darwin. I'm guessing it's Darwin. That's my hypothesis is the most probable thing. Since Darwin got blocked a few shows ago because he was saying a bunch of garbage on Euron Brooks' chat, and I saw him doing that. Um, he was civil on my show up to that point, at least reasonably civil. But when I saw him spewing garbage and insults or making disrespectful comments about Iran, I decided I was going to block him. And then he was no longer able to participate on my show. And I think because I'm guessing he still wants to participate, and so he's coming on, he's making up these fake accounts. And lo and behold, I just looked up Ayn Rand enthusiast number one, and the account was created today. So I assume it's the same person who keeps getting blocked under different accounts, but still wants to participate. And I'm guessing this is Darwin, just because of the kind of topics he says. And the garbage that Darwin was saying on Iran's chat is very consistent with the kind of garbage Papa was saying in my last stream's chat. So, um, I can actually show you what I'm looking at here. Um, I'll share my screen. Share. Ayn Rand enthusiast. So now this person is probably pretending to be on my side ideologically. Um, so, so there you have the YouTube page of this account. I just clicked on you can go to someone's channel by clicking on the dots next to their name in the chat, or at least I can. I don't know. The host can do that. I don't know if other people can do that. Um, let's see, is that showing up? Let me go to my, where's my, I gotta go to a different window. Yeah, there it is. So you can just click on the more here, and then it'll show you this account joined June 21st, 2025. That's today. So this person just created his account, presumably just so they could interact with my chat because I blocked their other accounts. Um, so this person's going to get blocked again. Let me just see what was written first. Yeah, he's asking about the same article this person asked about last time. There's a new New York Magazine article titled Israel Israel's undeniable war crimes in Gaza, you may want to check out. Oh, maybe that is a different article, but a similar topic. Because the last time this person was asking about uh, Israel's alleged war crimes. John Wayne is here. Hi, John. Simon says, I think he's a troll as well. Okay, so just doing some administrative stuff here. In just a moment, I'll be back with you. Okay. All right, he's blocked. All right, don't want to deal with that. Okay, back to the chat. Thanks for your patience. And thanks for the likes too. I see the likes have gone up. Okay, so let's see what else people have been saying in the chat. Um, yeah, we were talking about the universe, whether it's finite or infinite. And then Simon says expanding to what? Yeah, it's expanding relative to what? How do you say everything as a whole is expanding? Um, then Simon says he's also probably more pro-America than most presidents. Who is? Not sure what you're referring to there. Then Wade says redshift is generally accepted with no new matter and energy. Matter and energy is diluting in increased space. Okay, I think I've caught up on the chat to the last one I read because then I see that's where John came in at 1:13 Pacific. And then RW says, yeah, but it could it could just be an effect of the mechanisms in the watch. I guess you mean the atomic watch I was talking about for measuring the relativist effect, time dilation. The flying watches, yeah, flying the watches around the Earth experiment. Pro-America would be consistent with Western values. Oh, maybe he's uh, replying to the person who I blocked, who I think is Darwin, most likely. RW, if matter is unaffected What cannot be affected? Simon says, what's the point of making these accounts to just troll? Um, maybe he liked, I think he did like participating on my show. I mean, he was a good participant for many weeks. He called in the show like 3 or 4 times, and we had some good conversations. You can listen to him. Just if you go to the live tab on my channel, you can hear him. But then I saw him on your on show, and he was very rude and disrespectful, and I didn't want to have someone like that on my chat. Um, so I wouldn't have called him a troll up until that point when I saw him on Iran's show. But I don't think he was only rude to Iran too. I remember he was calling other people idiots. Um, so it's unfortunate because it was good having some interaction with him, but sometimes people they change for the worse, or maybe he was always like that and just pretending to be better or civil. Um, but maybe he valued participating on my show. Seems plausible to me that he did, and instead of, I guess, if he did screw up, he could have apologized and confessed and faced the facts, right? I think that's the right thing to do. That's the honest thing to do. Um, Fess up and try to make amends somehow. There's some things I don't think you can make up for, but depending on how serious it is, in this case, I'm not sure um, what could be done to make up for the kinds of things this person was saying. Um, so I don't know if he's redeemable at this point, but uh, maybe he's torn. He, like, on the one hand, he wants to participate, but on the other hand, he maybe he's fearful of doing it honestly and confronting the fact that he did something bad. And, or maybe he really thinks he didn't do anything bad. Um, I don't know, but uh, he certainly did, in my opinion, do something bad. So Simon says, "Oh no, now we're up to RW. Sorry if I'm not being very clear, but regarding that experiment with the time measurement device is going around the Earth, whatever theory they had that they think was confirmed by the change in keeping time, I'm thinking they did rule out that that's just the effect of the particular mechanisms that keep track of the time. The devices themselves, not so much the time is changed or time has been. I don't know, modified in some way that the experiment theorized. Okay, that was a lot there. um, I don't know that I want to turn this whole thing into a discussion of time dilation, but you can spend a little time on it. But please do feel free to keep chatting on other topics, and I'll spend more time on them because that's science is not as much my focus. Um, Wade says, I'm quite sure they have done experiments and proved it has something to do with the speed limit of light. And then Wade says, caught him. Smiley face. Yeah. Yeah, it didn't occur to me last time. Like I thought maybe it was actually a different person, but then I looked. What tipped me off was the date the account was created. When I looked up his account and I saw it was created the same date as the stream itself, that told me, okay, this is probably someone who just created this account, so he could because he's been blocked and he needs another way to participate. And same thing happened today. So uh, asking about the same sort of topics. So yeah, I think it's most likely all the same person. Um, Okay, I don't see anything else new in the chat, so I guess I will spend a little more time at least on RW's comments about time dilation, but please do feel free to raise other issues. Um, I'm mostly here to talk about philosophy, Ayn Rand's philosophy especially, but I don't see anything else in the chat right now. So, oh, I guess I have some notes I could talk from. I could say some. All right, I'll just spend a little more time on what RW says here about the time stuff, and then maybe I'll look at my notes and unless I see some new chats come in that I could talk about. So RW says at 1:17 p.m. Pacific. Sorry if I'm not being very clear, but regarding that experiment with the time measurement device is going around the Earth, whatever theory they had that they think was confirmed by the change in keeping time, I'm thinking they did rule out that that's just the effect on the particular mechanisms that keep track of the time devices themselves, not so much that the time has changed. Okay, I don't really have more to say on that. I just I don't know this well enough to engage much with this. So yeah, uh, yeah, I'll have to outsource this topic to somebody else. I've gone beyond the point where I could talk about it. Ah, here's a new one from Wade, just came in, and another one from RW. Uh, so Wade says, do you believe that specialization in jobs leads to people knowing less? That a plumber just knows pipes and an electrician only wires, so to speak? Well, I guess it's they they know less about a broader range of topics if you're a specialist than if you're a generalist, but you know more about your specialty. So I guess it's not obvious how to quantify knowledge if you're asking like, do they know less overall? uh, um, I mean, certainly they know the more time you're spending uh, acquiring knowledge about your specialty, the less time you have available to learn about other things outside your specialty. So you know less about some things, but more about others, namely the things in your specialty. So um, I think it's important to have. There's some things which I think everyone needs to know, and I think philosophy actually is a field which is relevant to everyone. I think everyone has views on philosophical issues, at least implicitly, if not explicitly, because philosophy deals with issues that are universal, like ethics, for example. How should you live? Well, this is a question that everybody faces. So everyone has to have some kind of view about ethics. Like, should I live for myself, pursue my own interests, or should I live for the sake of others? Should I be an altruist? Should I sacrifice myself? It doesn't matter what your job is, what your career is, what your profession is, no matter what your specialty is, you have to confront these ethical sorts of questions like what kind of life should I live? These very fundamental questions. Should I live for myself or should I live for others? So these sorts of questions that are inescapable are in the realm of philosophy. And so I think everyone has a philosophy, at least implicitly, if not explicitly. Not everyone thinks explicitly all the time about these issues, but somehow they have to get some answers. So they might go to church or learn from their parents, from their teachers in school. They get some kind of guidance on these ethical questions, um, and other sorts of questions in philosophy. Like, how do you know things? Like, this is a question everyone faces. If you're a plumber, how do I know that this is the right thing to do in order to fix the leak in the faucet? Or an electrician, how do I know that this is the right thing to do in order to um, fix the circuits in the house so that the house doesn't catch on fire if there's too much current flowing through the circuits? How do I know? How do I find out the answers? Do I consult a tea leaf reader or an astrologist who reads the stars? Or do I read the books of scientists, right? These questions about the nature of knowledge or epistemology, that's the branch of philosophy that deals with knowledge. These are questions that everyone has to face in some form. And philosophy deals with these kind of universal issues that apply to all human beings. So now you can be a specialist in philosophy and focus on those questions as your full-time job. But even if you don't, you still have to think about them, at least to some extent. Ayn Rand's article, Philosophy, Who Needs It, talks about this theme of everyone needs philosophy. Who needs it? Everybody does. Um, and everyone has answers to certain philosophical questions, which might be right or incorrect, right or wrong, consistent or inconsistent, but everyone has some answer. And you'll do much better in life. You'll achieve happiness if you have a consistent philosophy. And to get a consistent philosophy and one that corresponds to the facts, one that is true, it's something that you need to give at least some amount of thought to. And I'm here to help advance what I think is a true, good, consistent philosophy, Ayn Rand's philosophy of objectivism. All right, good to see we got some more chats coming in. Got some more from RW, and here's one from E. I don't recognize E before. Let me take a quick look at E's channel. All right, this was created 4 years ago. So this was not someone who just created this channel today. Um, not that I thought it was, but I was just curious because he's a new person, or she, and I wanted to take a quick look at E's channel. So I'm going to go to E's because I haven't seen E yet. And maybe I'll come back to RW if there's more time, but I like to spread the time around some. So E says, what will society be like when AI can do everything better than humans? Mass unemployment and ultimately leaving humans with no real purpose. Will this lead to anarchy or a utopia? Well, there's an assumption in the question that AI will be able to do everything better than humans. And then the question is just, what will society then be like when it is the case that AI can do everything better than humans? And I would question that assumption, which is part of the question. I don't know that it's true that AI will be able to do everything better than humans. So I won't speculate on what life will be like when that's the case, because I don't know that that ever will or even could be the case. Um, can AI do philosophy in an original kind of way, in a creative way? Can AI think about AI, um, and all the possibilities? I don't. There's some things I'm not sure AI could do, and I mean I don't think it is thinking like I just asked, can AI think about AI? But I don't think it can think about anything. Uh, if we're being literal here, now we can use these metaphors like think. And I mentioned this in the last show, I think. We can use metaphors like my computer died when the battery runs out of power, or my computer is going to sleep. My computer just told me something. But when we say these sorts of things, they're not true literally. I think they're just metaphorical ways of speaking, which are helpful and I think fine if you recognize that they are metaphors. They're not literally true. Um, but as for, so you ask about mass unemployment and leaving humans with no real purpose. Um, I don't think I don't foresee mass. Well, what exactly is meant by unemployments or employment? Um, to take the more fundamental concept, um, like, am I employed right now? I'm doing this show on YouTube, but I'm not really getting paid for it. Is this an occupation? Am I employed? Am I self-employed? Well, I hope I eventually one day make money on it. And if you want to help me get there, you can subscribe to my channel once I hit 1,000 subscribers, so I can apply to YouTube to have my channel monetized. But and am I employed right now? Well, maybe in a sense. Um, there's a broad sense of employment. Like right now, I am employing my faculties to talk about philosophy and to engage with chat. But in a narrower sense of employment, where it means you are getting paid to do something, um, I'm not getting paid. Well, I do have a couple supporters on Patreon, and I do appreciate that. Thank you. Um, but bracketing that, I'm not really getting paid to do this, not like as a full-time job where I can just do this and nothing else and live on this just by doing YouTube. Hopefully, I'll get there one day. But people can be employed doing things. Like I think you need to be productive no matter how advanced AI gets, because otherwise you don't have a purpose in life. It's just boring and there's no point. Um, so I mean, I think with the advance of technology, it's just that often what happens is the types of jobs change. Not that there's no jobs at all or no productivity at all. It's just the kind of production humans engage in changes. So, like with the invention of modern farm equipment, right? Combine harvesters or whatever. Now you don't have to have hundreds or thousands of people working in a field. You can have one guy driving this tractor, or maybe you'll get a self-driving tractor one day, or maybe they already exist. I don't know. And now, instead of having hundreds or thousands of people doing back-breaking labor, picking berries or whatever crop and farm, they can do other things. Like they can go into the industry that creates the tractor that does this. Um, so now they're working in a factory that produces tractors or something. And then maybe after decades or who knows how much time goes by, you can develop robots that can create the tractors in the factory. Okay, so now those jobs go away, but now there are jobs for building the robots, and you have a whole industry to service the robots. So I don't think you can always make things better, more enjoyable, jobs that you find more pleasure in. So I don't think there's ever going to be a point where people can just stop being productive and stop improving their lives. It's just that maybe they will find more and more enjoyable ways to be productive. Maybe you enjoy working on a robot more than you do driving a tractor. And maybe you enjoy driving a tractor more than you do picking berries in a field. But these are just different stages. And there's always something productive you can do to make things better. It's just that, what that looks like and what you're going to get paid to do is going to change. Like maybe, thousands of years ago, no one could pay you to drive a diesel powered tractor in the field because they didn't exist, such machines. But who knows what sorts of jobs are going to exist in 100 or 1,000 million years. It just, it's, uh, it's hard to project. I think impossible really to know. But I do think it seems like you're always going to need something productive to do, some way to make life better in order to have a point to living. Um, Otherwise, isn't it just boring? And why live at all? It's not enjoyable, I think, if you're not being productive and finding ways to make your life go better. Uh, and then there's some more in E's comments. He also asked about, will this lead to anarchy or a utopia? Um, I don't see why it would lead to anarchy, the absence of a government. I think you're still going to need a government to protect people's rights. Now, the shape that government takes might change its form. Like maybe you can have robots doing what policemen are doing now, just as like now we have drones engaging in wars instead of having to risk the life of your pilot to do some risky um, flights. Maybe he'll get shot down. Now you can send out a drone. Um, and instead of a policeman having to risk his life to deal with some criminals, maybe we'll have robots that can do some of that work. And I've seen robot dogs, like robot police dogs. I think maybe just as an experiment. I don't know that they're actually used, um, but the way that uh, policing or military functions occur, maybe that'll look a lot different in the future. But I think you're still going to need some kind of government, some mechanism of protecting people from force, which is the point of the government, protect individuals from uh, others using physical force against them, like robbers using force to take their property, or rapists forcing themselves on people against their will. Um, all right, so that was all answering E. And I guess if utopia is like a ideal sorts of scenario, I mean, I think capitalism is that. If we understand what capitalism is as being a system in which individual rights are protected, which means people aren't initiating force against each other, then I think that is utopia as far as political systems go. And I think we'll be able to advance maximally. We'll become as well off as possible if we do have a capitalist society that in which people's rights are protected from coercion, the initiation of force. Okay, so we got some chats from RW and Wade. Um, so let me read through some of theirs. RW back at 132 Pacific says, I know nothing about physics, but time relativity seems like it goes against the metaphysics of objectivism. I don't know about that. I don't know that objectivism has a view on whether time can dilate in the way that relativity theory says it can. I don't think Ayn Rand commented on this. I don't remember her commenting on this. Maybe you could say something in the objectivist metaphysics implies that there couldn't be something like time dilation. Like a different time uh, for somebody than it is for somebody else. Um, but I don't know about that. I haven't thought about this much. It's not obvious to me that there's anything in objectivist metaphysics that would say time dilation can't happen, or that to make it more concrete, I would say like so this experiment that I mentioned where you fly this atomic clock around the Earth and then you measure. Um, I just saw a little reactions going up there. Um, where you measure the time on the atomic clock and compare it to the clock that was left uh, on the Earth, relativity predicts that there's going to be this certain discrepancy, and then you observe it to actually happen. Um, so exactly how you interpret what's going on there, I'm not sure. Should you say that time was going faster or at a slower rate in the one that was moving? I think that's what happens. Like you don't age as fast the faster you are traveling relative to the speed of light, or I guess relative to anything. But um, I guess if you're traveling at the speed of light, then everything just looks the same, right? Because you're everything is kind of frozen because you're going the same speed that light is traveling. So nothing is changing really. So I guess uh, the closer you travel to the speed of light, the more time slows down for you, and the closer you time gets to a point where it just stops. There's no there's no change in time at all if you're going at the speed of light. Yeah, I remember this documentary I saw about Einstein. I think it was back in high school, and Einstein had this thought experiment, and I remember the narrator who was doing the voice of Einstein in the documentary said, "What would it be like to ride a beam of light?" In a German accent, um, and it just I was just reminded of that now as I was talking through this. Like, I guess what would it be like if you ride a beam of light? Is everything would just kind of come to a halt, and so I guess you age less, or you because time passes slower. So the person going around in the orbit, uh, he comes back like 4 seconds younger or something than the person who his twin who was just on the Earth. This is I guess there was some an explanation of this in a physics class or something that I heard many years ago, and there was this twin experiment. Like one twin goes into the relativistic time travel, and the other one just stays on Earth, and the twin ends up coming back like 4 seconds younger. Uh, so I don't know like what objectivism would have to say about that, if anything. Um, but it is interesting. I guess one thing I would have to say is like there can't be contradictions. So you can't be both 4 seconds younger and not 4 seconds younger at the same time in the same respect, right? Because that would be a violation of the law of identity. That would be A and non-A. So there can't be contradictions. Um, but there could be very kind of strange things happen that are not what you normally experience. Oh, Matthew Stroud is here. Hi, Matt. Matthew. Wade says it seems that the more branches of knowledge you have, the more the branches complement each other, like music, math, physics, etc. All fields seem to complement each other. It should all integrate like I was saying, without contradiction. So there shouldn't be any inconsistencies between the various branches of knowledge. They should form a unity, an integrated whole. Leonard Peikoff has some lectures on this. He's a objectivist philosopher who gave a a series of lectures called Unity in Epistemology and Ethics. And one of the themes of that is the unity of knowledge. Like, in a sense, there are no subjects like history or philosophy or physics. There's just the vast field of knowledge, and then we carve it up. Um, but they're not like airtight compartments that have no connections to each other and no interactions. They all integrate with each other. Um, so the more branches of knowledge you have, the more the branches complement each other. That's what Wade says. Yeah, they should complement each other. And if they don't, like if there's some contradiction, like astrology and physics, right? If astrology is telling you some things and physics is telling you something else, like then you say, okay, at least one has to be wrong. All right. Maybe astrology. If that's the more mystical field. RW says, did you discuss your views on Charles II on a previous episode? No, I didn't. Someone mentioned that. I don't know if that was you, but I remember someone asked about that in a previous episode, and I didn't have time to get to that. Um, so this, for anyone who doesn't know, he was a YouTuber several years ago, and he had a channel. Maybe it still exists, but he hasn't been active on it for a long time. But for I don't know, a year or two or something, he was putting out a lot of videos, and a lot of people in the objectivist, well, I don't know how many, but he had a following. I watched some of his content. I don't know how much, maybe a dozen or two hours worth of contents from his channel. I thought some was good. Some was quite good. I remember there was a video on free will that I liked. I thought was good. Um, but I also thought he was quite disrespectful, I think, towards ARI and or maybe some people associated with ARI, and I did not like that. I didn't think that was appropriate. Um, so I I guess I had a somewhat mixed view of him. I thought there was some value to his videos, but also some disvalues. Um, so there's a little, and it's been a long time since I've seen his content, so I don't know that I could say much more than that. But that there's just like a very broad brush take um, on him. Okay. Wade says consciousness is needed to evaluate a sense, like how it feels. AI can never know. It has logic, axioms, etc. But how can emotion be programmed? I doubt it can. Okay, I'm going to let me go up to Matthew Stroud's because I haven't engaged with him yet. He says, interesting that utopia translates as no place, a place that has never been and can never be. In a sense, the idea of utopia is defeatist. Huh, interesting. I didn't know that. I haven't looked up the etymology of utopia before. I'm going to do that right now, actually. I'm just going to Google utopia etymology. Mid 16th century based on Greek ou, not plus topos, place. Yeah, just like you said. The word was first used in the book Utopia 1516 by Sir Thomas More. Yeah, no, but yeah, so maybe there is some defeatism built into that idea. Like there could never be, and it's supposed to be like an ideal place. So if there is no place that's ideal, then yeah, you might say that's kind of a malevolent universe sort of view, to use one of Ayn Rand's phrases, as opposed to a benevolent universe, um, where the universe can be a good, happy place where you achieve your values. And I think that's what we need a good philosophy for, like objectivism, to make life on Earth good. Um, Thanks for mentioning that, though, about the etymology. Um, all right, so now, now I can go back to some of these that I skipped. Feel free to call in, by the way. I don't have any callers yet. Um, Actually, maybe this is a good time to take a break. We've gone about an hour, and I usually have been taking a break, I think, roughly halfway through. So, yeah, let me take a break for a few minutes, and then I'll come back and we'll continue. I encourage people to keep chatting, and I encourage people to call in. The number is, or the link is pinned in the chat. So, instructions are all there. All right, I'm just going to turn off the mic and camera for a bit, and I'll be back shortly. See you soon. All right, I am back. See if we got anything new in the chat here. Oh, a couple from Matthew Stroud. Matthew says, replying to Wade, you couldn't think of utopia a bit like infinity, or you could think of utopia a bit like infinity, a descriptive idea for something, but not a real thing, and only useful in certain circumstances. There is a similar etymology there because you have the in at the beginning to negate the thing that comes next, right? Not finite, infinity, and then you have the utopia, uh, a different sort of uh, negative particle there. I don't know if I guess utopia was Greek, based on the Greek. Maybe infinity is based on Latin because finis, that's Latin for end, right? So infinity, no end. Um, a descriptive idea for something, but not a real thing, and only useful in certain circumstances. I think Harry Benswanger he's done some work on the philosophy of math and philosophy of science, and I think he's argued he doesn't like the term infinity, I think, if I recall, but he's come up with some alternative way of thinking about quantity or something that it's gets around the need for infinity, but it achieves the same sorts of functions that infinity is used for. Something like that. I'm not very familiar with his idea, but if you're interested in this, you might want to check out some of his work. I think he's working on a book on philosophy of math. Uh, have no idea when that might come out, but there is some discussion on his web forum, HBL. Um, so you could look there in the meantime. And then Matthew says, utopianism could be a good description of a bad philosophy, but utopia is a fiction. So there's different ways you might use the term utopia with a capital U. I guess that could refer to the utopia in Sir Thomas More's book, but maybe in a lowercase sense. It's got a more generic sense, where it just refers to a good society or an ideal society. Saw some little reactions float up a while ago. Thanks for those. Nice to see those sometimes. All right, so that was coming from the end of the chat. Let me now scroll back a bit. See if there's RW said, for AI, humans will have jobs that people value human interaction in. And then he says, people used to clean poop from the streets. Now they are car salesmen writing code for cars, mechanics, marketing for cars, etc., etc. Poop from horses. Then the car came along. Yeah, that's progress. That's progress. I guess some people are Luddites. That's what they call them, right? When they're anti-technology and they don't want change. They want to freeze things at a certain state. And then they smash the machines. There's been some people who break into was it loom factories, like where they would weave the clothing in the Industrial Revolution and smash the machines, the looms. Yeah, that's freezing progress. That's bad. And it's a violation of rights, right? It's to destroy someone else's property. It's immoral. We want to advance. Maybe some people they want to be stagnant and they don't want to put forth the effort required to advance, and so they try to hold others back. But there's no right to stagnate. Ayn Rand wrote an article called "The Divine Right of Stagnation," and I think she might address this sort of attitude. Some people they want to think, I've got a right to my job, and I don't. If I ever have to make a change, like I have to move somewhere or acquire a new set of skills, that's not fair to me. That's too much of a burden on me. I should just be able to do the same thing forever. And um, but no, that's not true. You don't have a right to stagnate. Sometimes circumstances change and you need to adapt, and you have no right to hold other people back. Uh, Wade says, unfortunately, only if you own or can sell yourself to the market are you a worthy citizen. So if jobs become redundant, a lot of people will also become redundant. Would those in power care? See if I want to say anything on that. Only if you own or can sell yourself to the market are you a worthy citizen. Worthy to whom? Um, and you can always, the most important thing is to be worthy in your own eyes, right? To have self-esteem. And I think to do that, you need to be productive. And that's something everyone can do on some scale. Some people might be more productive than others, but everyone has the ability to do something to increase value in the world. Even if you're like a paraplegic, right? You have no legs, right? You can use your arms and hands and do data entry on a computer or something. There's probably 1,000 other things you could do. Take calls at a call center. Um, there's just there's so many possibilities, opportunities. I think everyone, like maybe if you're a vegetable in a coma, you can't do anything and you're entirely dependent on others. But short of that, right? Um, I've seen, sometimes people with Down syndrome, I've seen working at the grocery store, like putting food in bags. So they're not entirely dependent on other people. Even if you have some kind of disability, you can still be productive in some way. And I think everyone should be productive in some way. And that's a way of building worth in your own eyes and to other people, right? Um, Worth to yourself and to others. But primarily, I think what's most important is become worthy, becoming worthy to yourself. Well, jobs will change. You say if jobs become redundant, a lot of people will also become redundant. Um, or they might become redundant for a certain job, but not for other jobs. Like RW was saying, like the people who used to clean horse poop from the streets, now they're car salesmen writing code for cars or mechanics, right? So now they're redundant as street sweepers, but they're not redundant if they change their occupation, which sometimes you need to do. Would those in power care? I don't know. What do you mean those in power? In a capitalist society, you don't have rulers and rules, right? People are equal before the law. Um, and I think everyone should care that every individual is productive in some way. Like it's in my interest that other people in the world are productive. I don't have power over someone else in a political sense, or I can tell them what to do. They're not like my slave or my servants. I'm not using force to threaten them. Um, I can make them offers. I can trade with them. I hope everyone engages in productive activities, and then they will produce values that I could trade with them for. Uh, then RW says, I thought objectivism holds that time is a measurement of change, not a thing that can slow down or speed up. Yeah, I have heard that sort of comment somewhere in the objectivist literature. Time is a measurement of change. As for the next part, you say not a thing that can slow down or speed up. Um, yeah, I'm not sure. I might have said something like that. Like when you go close to the speed of light, time slows down for you. But maybe maybe a better way to, because relative to what does time slow down? Like time is not. I don't think it's right to think of it as like some completely mind independent phenomenon in the universe. Like there's this clock of the universe that's just ticking, and everything else can be measured by it. I think time is. I mean, it starts from some perspective you have. Like we can observe the daily change in the sky, right? Going from light to dark, right? That's one measurement of time, which we call the day, and then we have other measurements of time. We've got the year and the second, but those are relative to us as observers on Earth, right? Maybe if we lived on a different planet, we would measure things in a different sort of way, like the rotation of Mars, not the rotation of Earth, would be our new unit of our day. The meaning of day could be different, as like than the meaning of day on Earth in terms of how much time goes by. Like, but there's no like absolute or mind independent sense of time. But there are we can compare things like the position of or like how many seconds have ticked off on the timer of the atomic clock that went around in the orbit, and then how many seconds have ticked off on the clock that was stationary on Earth or relative to Earth. And we can compare those two things, and maybe we can speak loosely or metaphorically by saying time sped up for the one that was going around the Earth. But I'm not sure. Like I haven't thought much about exactly how to interpret that sort of idea. Is it just a metaphor to say time speeds up, or is there something literal about it? I don't know. I don't really take a view on that. So maybe you're right that if we were being literal, we shouldn't say that time speeds up or slows down. Um, okay, let me go ahead some in the chat. Maybe I could also look up what Ayn Rand says about time in the Ayn Rand lexicon, which I've used a few times on this during my streams. All right, so looks like we got another person who's trying to get around the block in the chat because I just went to the page of this person who is named after a chatter who I blocked a while ago. And again, the account was just created today. All right, so I just blocked that person. Maybe it's the ghost of Darwin, perhaps. Darwin number four. Maybe that's what that is. Okay, so yeah, let me pull up the Ayn Rand lexicon and see if there's something on time there. I know Aristotle had some comments about time. I think in his work on the physics, or the one called Physics, and I believe Ayn Rand's view is influenced by that. Okay. Yeah, there's just a quote from Leonard Peikoff. Yeah, I think he might be the only one. Well, between he and Ayn Rand, I think it might only be Leonard Peikoff who has comments in here on space or time. I just clicked on the, yeah, for space, there's also just one entry by Leonard Peikoff. So, here, let me just pull up the time one because that's the one that we've been talking about. Let me share my screen. Share. Okay. So here is what Leonard Peikoff says in his course, The Philosophy of Objectivism, from lecture two, the question period. He says, time is a measurement of motion. As such, it is a type of relationship. Time applies only within the universe when you define a standard, such as the motion of the Earth around the sun. If you take that as a unit, you can say this person has a certain relationship to that motion. He has existed for 3 revolutions. He is 3 years old. But when you get to the universe as a whole, obviously no standard is applicable. You cannot get outside the universe. The universe is eternal in the literal sense, non-temporal, out of time, unquote. Yeah, and that's like what I was saying about the universe expanding before. I don't think you can say the universe as a whole is expanding because that would imply the universe is in space. Whereas I think the idea here is that space is in the universe, or it's a relation between things in the universe, or distance maybe is a another term, maybe a better term. Because space is nothing. Well, there is no nothing. Otherwise, it wouldn't be nothing. um, I think Parmenides is the philosopher who said, "What is, and what is not is not." But let's see. Let's go to the space entry here. So here it says, again from Leonard Peikoff in the same course, Philosophy of Objectivism, says, space, like time, is a relational concept. It does not designate an entity, but a relationship which exists only within the universe. The universe is not in space any more than it is in time. To be in a position means to have a certain relationship to the boundary of some container. For example, you are in New York. There's a point of the Earth's surface on which you stand. That's your spatial position. Your relation to this point, oh, sorry, that's your spatial position, your relation to this point. All it means to say there is space between two objects is that they occupy different positions. In this case, you are focusing on two relationships, the relationship of one entity to its container and of another to its container simultaneously. The universe, therefore, cannot be anywhere. Can the universe be in Boston? Can it be in the Milky Way? Places are in the universe, not the other way around. Is the universe unlimited in size? No. Everything which exists is finite, including the universe. What then, you ask, is outside the universe if it is finite? This question is invalid. The phrase outside the universe has no referent. The universe is everything. Outside the universe stands for that which is where everything isn't. There is no such place. There isn't even nothing out there. There is no out there, unquote. All right. So that's some good material to have in this live stream. So glad we had a reason to bring that up. All right, looking back up the chat now. See some chats from Wade and Matthew. Just taking a quick look at my YouTube analytics here on the back end. All right. So Wade says to Matthew, make sure things can get better and worse. This is what I think most people mean by a hell or a utopia. Oh, he meant he is a typo. He said, surely things can get better and worse. This is what I think most people mean by a hell or a utopia. And then Matthew says to Wade, utopian can be used as a negative critique against philosophies that they claim that claim they can get humanity to a better place, so to speak. That reminds me of a comment that came up in my call to David Pakman's show. So that's some of you might remember I was on that's the largest channel I've ever been on, David Pakman. He has over 3 million subscribers now. And I plan to put out some videos commenting on my appearances on his show. But I think in the end of my first call, after I was describing my view of what I support politically, he described it as utopian libertarianism. And I, I commented on both of those. At first, I misheard him. I thought he said utilitarian, and he said, but what he actually said was utopian libertarianism. And then that was at the end of the first call, so I didn't really have time to address it, I think, in the first call. But I think it was in the second call that I said, I picked up where the first call left off, and I said, you described my view as utopian libertarianism, and I want to comment on both of those. So I said some things to distinguish my view from libertarianism, and then I also said some things to distinguish my view from topian, assuming from utopian, assuming that meant impractical, because I think sometimes people use it with that kind of flavor. They say, "Oh, that's just a utopian vision. Like it's not a realistic thing. Come down to earth, right? Be practical. You're just talking about some pie in the sky thing that can't actually happen." And I said, "No, I think it actually can, and I think we have historical evidence that shows that it can succeed historically. Not that we've seen exactly what I propose or what Ayn Rand proposes. There's been no society that completely um, abolishes the initiation of force and has no coercion in that sense. But we have seen societies that have gotten closer to that and farther from that. And I think the closer societies have gotten to that, the better they have done. And the further they've gotten away from it, the worse they've done. So I think that is evidence, historical evidence, that can be used to justify the idea that these sorts of principles actually have good results. And let's take that. Let's be consistent about it. Just take it all the way. Be extreme, we could say. Extreme on some things is good, like extreme honesty, right? Should you have a mix of lying and telling the truth, or is it good to be extremely honest or extremely rational? I think sometimes it's good to go to extremes. It means you're being consistent. If you're being consistent about something good, that's a good thing. And if we see evidence that a certain set of principles is leading to good results, let's apply those principles as much as we can. And so this idea of utopian came up in my call, and I think Matthew is making a comment similar here, where he says utopian can be used as a negative critique. I think that's how Pakman was using it in my call. So um, you get a sense of how someone is using the term. I guess it could also be used in a positive sense, but given the context in which it's used, you pick up on the context clues and you get an idea of how someone is using it. And Wade says, "Well, we aren't living in caves ridden with fleas, fearing some specters in the dark. Don't get me wrong, we are still idiots in many ways." That's what Wade says. Wade is. Have you ever read Ayn Rand, Wade? I think you might have. You called here a few shows ago, and I think you might have been new to Ayn Rand or my channel. Maybe you hadn't read her before, which is okay. I welcome people who are new to Ayn Rand. Um, but I would highly recommend reading some Ayn Rand. And I recommend my show too. So thanks for being here. Yeah, because I try to promote and advocate for Ayn Rand's ideas, but um, then so you might get a different viewpoint if you read some of her works. That's why I thought to say that to Wade. He says, "I enjoy learning from you, Dan." Smiley face emoji. I appreciate that, Wade. I'm glad you enjoy learning from me. Yeah, and I'm trying to build my audience here. So I definitely appreciate people coming here to learn, and especially with if they enjoy it. It's all about enjoyment, right? If you don't enjoy it, it's why why do it? Not to be a whim worshiper, right? You got to think about um, is this just some out of context pleasure, or does this integrate with my life as a whole? Does it support my long range enjoyment of life? If so, then I think it's good. So, all right, so let's see. We got and Matthew said in reply to Wade, it's, I guess meaning utopian, is often used to smear practical and achievable goals, as well as criticizing obviously dumb endpoints. Yeah, I think that's the sort of sense in which Pakman was using it. Then Wade says, Matthew, I hear you. Matthew says, objectivism could be smeared as utopian. As commonly used, utopian is probably an anti-concept. And then Matthew says, it's an attack on a principled stance, much like extremism. And that is the last chat I see here. So I'm caught up now. Feel free to jump in if you're just watching. I like to see who's watching. So you can just say hi. You don't even have to put in a comment or question. But I also welcome people just watching anonymously. That's fine too. So we got 10 people here now. That's nice to see. Getting into the double digits. And my analytics change sometimes. Like when I log in a day or two later after the stream, it'll tell me like the maximum number of people who are watching during the stream. Oh, hi, Kuda Baba. He just popped in the chat. Nice to see you. Um, thanks. So yeah, my analytics, they will usually there's some variation. Like YouTube, I guess it runs some kind of tests and it verifies whether maybe there were bots in the chat or genuine people or just the same person coming and going. Maybe I don't know what their algorithm is for figuring out, but even though it says there are 10 people watching right now, it might show me in my analytics later that the maximum watching was 8 or 9, right? It's not necessarily the same. Once I did a private stream just with one other person, and I sent him the link just as a test. And so only two people had the link. But when I logged into the live stream, the test, it said there were four people watching, which is impossible, right? Unless, it's YouTube has some kind of bot or something that it sends to the live stream to do some analytics. I don't know how it works. But anyways, the numbers you see on YouTube don't always match what I'll see later in the analytics. But it gives some idea of what's happening, and I definitely appreciate. I think YouTube is an amazing piece of technology, and I definitely appreciate being able to use it and all the kind of analytics it provides. All right. What else? Don't see any callers. I do have some notes I could talk about. I guess I'll do that, at least until and unless I see any new chats come in. So one thing, building on a topic that's come up in the last couple streams is the standard of value. So how do we get the idea that life is the standard of value? This came up in a call with Kirk, um, and then I've talked about it a few times since then. And so if you want to, I actually put it in the title of my last stream. The first topic in the title is "Life is the Standard." So I said some things about it there, but let me try to build on that some more. Just some further thoughts on it. Um, so plants. Let's talk about plants. The plants have values. I've talked many times about how we get our idea of good and bad from pleasure and pain. And if we didn't have pleasure and pain, there would be no basis for the concepts of good and bad or good and evil or value and disvalue. But because we do have these experiences of pleasure and pain, starting out as infants, right? We just have this inbuilt mechanism, this pleasure pain mechanism that we come into the world with. It's not something we choose, but I think this pleasure pain mechanism gives us a basis for thinking some things are good and some things are bad, and we experience pleasure as good, and we experience pain as bad. It's just kind of baked in to the experience that it's good or bad. Um, but plants don't have this, right? At least I think it's plausible that plants don't experience anything. They don't have consciousness, but they are living. They are engaged in goal-directed action, um, and they can die. So, but how can we say like something is good for a plant, like water or sunlight or soil is good for the plant if it doesn't have pleasure? And how can we say that not getting any water or not getting any sunlight or not having any soil is bad for the plant if it doesn't have any pain? Um, so I think it might be a extension of what we experience as humans, and we just kind of project that onto plants. So in the human case, pleasure correlates with life in existence, and pain correlates with death and non-existence. And we just using this correlation from the human case, we apply it to the plant case, and we say when the plant is uh, acting in a way that promotes its existence, it's doing well. It's good for it to act in a way that promotes its existence, because in the human case, what's good for us is what promotes our existence. But why is what promotes our existence good? Well, because associated with pleasure. If we didn't have any pleasure in the human case, we wouldn't have any basis for thinking that that which promotes our existence is good, right? Who cares if we're not getting any pleasure from it or avoiding any pain? So, because that which promotes our own life or existence is also that which promotes our own pleasure or enjoyment or happiness, well, then we just kind of transfer that over to the case of the plant, and we say, even though it doesn't experience pleasure or pain, it can do certain things like stretch its roots out into the soil to get water or whatever. It can do certain things that promote its existence, and those are the things that we call good, even though it doesn't have pleasure. Now, you might say, in a strict sense, uh, there are no values for plants because there is no pleasure that goes along with its existence. And there's a topic, values for weeds. That's the phrase that sticks in my mind, which I think comes up somewhere in the objectivist literature, or it might just be audio recordings. It might have been a workshop with Ayn Rand on her, you know how there, you might know there were workshops on her epistemology, her book Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology, and there was a series of private workshops which uh, a bunch of philosophers, graduate students, and some professors asked Ayn Rand about her theory of concepts, and that eventually came out as the appendix that was published in the second edition of Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology. But there weren't only private workshops in epistemology. I think there were also some on value theory. And I think it might have been in one of these private workshops on value theory that this phrase values for weeds came up. I think one of the participants might have asked, do the plants really have values or something? Or do weeds really have values? And maybe it was said that no, they don't in a strict sense. Um, but maybe in a loose sense or a broader sense, we can say that plants have values. But I think the way to get to the point, if you are going to say plants have values in some sense, it's by extension from the human case, or the animal case at least, where there is pleasure associated with life and existence, and then that gets projected onto the plants. You know, what makes us exist and have pleasure is good, and that which makes the plant exist is also good. Um, okay, so that goes a little beyond what I said last time about life as the standard. I just wanted to bring the topic of plants into this. And plants does come up in the Objectivist Ethics, that article by Ayn Rand. When she's talking about the nature of value, she talks about both plants and non-human animals, and then also the human case. Um, okay, let me come back to the chat here. Um, let me say one more thing before I come to the chat. So there's also the is-ought problem, so-called, which David Hume made famous. How do you get an ought from an is, or a value from facts? You can see what is the case, but how can you see what ought to be the case? Well, I think pleasure maybe is actually the key to bridging that divide, to bridging the is-ought gap. When we experience pleasure, I think we experience it as good. It's not just like a neutral fact, and which has no evaluative aspect baked into it. I think we experience it as a good thing, and we experience pain as a bad thing. So there's not a sharp division between facts and values. They're kind of combined, and and at least in the case of these experiences of pleasure and pain, it's a fact that we have this some kind of experience which is like got its goodness baked into it. Um, so maybe that's the key to bridging this is-ought gap. There really is no is-ought gap to bridge. It just all comes at once in the experience of pleasure or pain. Um, and I've said this in at least one previous video. Um, but since I've kind of revisited this topic of life as the standard, maybe it's good to put all this material in one series of uh, subsequent videos, like one after the next, to build off. So it's not all scattered. Maybe I'll do a video someday where I put it all into one video and I collect my thoughts from various videos into one place. But for now, I at least wanted to make this sort of point. Um, Now, I don't know if so. What I just said about pleasure being the key to bridging the is-ought gap, I don't recall Ayn Rand saying that, or at least putting it in that kind of way. She says something in the Objectivist Ethics. I remember there's a line where she says something like, "So much for the problem of the is-ought gap," or something. I forget the exact words, but I think in that paragraph or passage of a few paragraphs, I don't know that she mentions pleasure there. So I think the way she thinks you bridge this alleged gap between facts and values, maybe she's thinking of it in a somewhat different way than I just presented here with pleasure. I'm not sure. I would want to revisit that passage. Maybe I'll do that later in the live stream or maybe in a different live stream. Um, but anyways, let me come back to the chat now and see what's going on. Ah, John Wayne is here. Hi, John. He says, the fact that something is determines what it ought to do. Well, I mean, there is an issue of choice. So, yeah, but I think that is close to the words Ayn Rand uses in the Objectivist Ethics. Um, yeah, I should look that passage up. Um, okay, I'm just going to make a note about that here. Ayn Rand's passage on is oughts. Okay, I want to look that up. But let me just come back to the chat right now. Maybe I'll look it up later. Um, so Matthew Stroud, right after Kudababa, he says, I have a subject for you, Dan. Fair use policy on YouTube. It seems like different music publishers treat copyright differently. UMG takes a very protective stance against YouTubers featuring their music. I don't know what UMG is. And then Matthew says, much of the problem seems to stem from YouTube's own policies and agreements with publishers. Creators can find their channels wiped out overnight by YouTube through copyright strikes. The whole thing may have to end up in court to settle what fair use really means. Okay. Oh, United Music Group or something like that, says Kudababa, is what UMG is. I don't use music on my channels, at least not usually, so I'm not very familiar what the YouTube terms of service are regarding that. There is some built-in music to YouTube on the platform you can use free of royalty, and there's no copyright issues, but I guess if you want to bring something else in, maybe there's a issue then. Oh, Universal Music Group, says Kudababa. But like I've been able to put videos on my channel. Like if I have a debate or a discussion with some other YouTuber, so we're both in the debate, and he posts the video on his channel, and I also post it on my channel, and there's no copyright problem there. even though it's the same content, or at least mostly the same content. Maybe he starts it at a slightly different place, like a few seconds before I do at the beginning, or maybe he cuts it off at the end in a few seconds different. But at least the vast majority of the videos are the same, and it doesn't get flagged by YouTube. Now, even if it does get flagged, like maybe the algorithm will be tripped if it notices there's a similarity between two videos. But I think it still might be up to the content creators to file a complaint if they think their video is being unfairly used. And maybe with the content creators I've had discussions with, they've just had no problem with my also using their video, or vice versa. Like if I'm the host, often there's one person who's kind of like the host and the other is the guest. And sometimes I'm playing the role of the host, sometimes I'm playing the role of the guest. Sometimes it's a little ambiguous. It's not really clear who's which position. But anyways, I've never had any of videos like that get flagged by YouTube. But I think even if they did get flagged, I guess maybe the next step would be one or the other or both creators would have to file a complaint if they had some problem with it. Um, uh, and I've just never got to that phase, so I don't know exactly how it works. I usually just ask for permission to be safe if I'm not clearly the host. Um, and typically the other person will say, yeah, it's fine. The one who did not say that was David Pakman. So that's actually why I'm publishing my calls to his channel with commentary on my own channel, because then I'm transforming the content. It's not just a straight upload of his content like I've done with many other people. Some content creators, they are not okay with that if they're playing the role of the host. Although even David Pakman, he said, like if I made my own recording while I was doing it, like if I had the video on me and I was recording the call, I could have used that and uploaded that to my channel as opposed to the video that he made where the camera is on him. But I didn't make a video of myself talking to him when I called into his show. Maybe I'll do that in the future. But I didn't have a video like that, so I couldn't use that. Um, so I had to do something else, like do a commentary on the video in order to get that comment on my channel. I was wondering if I could just use the audio of the my calls to his show and just put that on, because that's not exactly the same content that's on his channel. And I could have just, like, suppose I had made my own video when I called into his show, and he's okay with me posting that. It's my own video. Now, let's say I extracted the audio from that video that I made. Well, wouldn't that audio then be identical to the audio that's extracted from the video on his channel? Um, Now, I asked him about this, like, could I just post the audio, thinking that, well, I'm not sure why he would object to it since I could have just come up with it on my own. But I think he got kind of irritated when I was asking that, thinking I was asking the same question I asked in a previous time I called into his show. And I discussed this some in the draft script I've written for my commentary videos. Like in my second call, I asked him if I could put the videos of my calls to his channel on my channel, and he said no. And then the next time I called, I asked if I could just put the audio from the videos, not the whole videos, including the video. And he thought, I'm not sure he realized I was asking a somewhat different question, and I think that got him annoyed. He thought I was asking the same question twice. He's like, every time you call in, you ask this question, or I think you asked this question. So I addressed this in my commentary, at least the draft. We'll see if it makes it into the final version. But anyways, um, I plan to come out with commentary videos. Maybe, I don't know, maybe within a month or so. I've completed a draft script for all three of my calls to his show. Um, at least the first draft. I'll go back over it again, and then I have to do all the video editing. I'm not sure how long that's all going to take. I do have another video that I think I'll come out with sooner. It was the debate I did with someone. Um, Not sure when I'm going to release it. Still got to think about that. But that one's ready to go. I've already uploaded it to YouTube, and it's just at a private link now. So I just have to make the link available, and then everyone can see it. But I want to time it right between like my shows and my live stream shows and other things I have going on. So I haven't decided yet when I'm going to publish that one. It's a debate with a guy named Jolah. Jolah Talks Politics is the name of his channel. He has like 26,000 some subscribers, and he's also got a call-in show. So I called into him. This was several weeks ago, back in April actually, but I've just been busy with other things, so I haven't produced the video until just a few days ago. I finally uploaded it to my channel and got it ready for publication. Um, but a lot of my material, I think most of my material is evergreen kind of content. So it's not really like commentary on news stuff that happened yesterday. So it doesn't get stale for the most part. Most of my content is it lasts. It's not really the type that they call it evergreen, right? It just lasts. But I do remember there was maybe one or two references to stuff that Trump had just recently done with tariffs or something, which might sound a little dated, given the way uh, the news cycle has evolved. But most of the content is evergreen content. So, all right. So that was all just triggered by Matthew's comments about copyrights on YouTube. I think you get like three strikes or something. I've never gotten a strike on my channel, fortunately. Um, so even if you do something that causes your channel to get a strike, I don't think that means the channel is immediately going to be deleted necessarily. Maybe if it's bad enough, it will be deleted just after, like you don't get three chances. But I think at least sometimes they'll give you three strikes before they take a channel down. I'm not sure. Um, I don't want to have to find out the hard way. I thought sometimes though it might be good to have a backup channel in case something goes bad. Uh, but that's yeah, maybe I'll do that at some point because I have heard cases where uh, content creators get strikes or their channel gets taken down, and it makes me worry a bit because it's not always clear to me that it was justified, and I might think like, geez, I might do something. What if I do something like that and I get my channel taken down? Um, so I've at least seen some things happen. I can't give you details now, but I remember there have been cases where that made me a bit concerned. Um, so maybe it would be good for me to create a backup channel uh, at some point. Okay. I did get blocked on Facebook once. Someone hacked my account. And then I waited a while, but then I couldn't retrieve my accounts. But eventually, the hack was fixed. And but in the meantime, I created another account. So I actually have two accounts on Facebook, but I went back to using my original account once I got the that original account restored after it was hacked. Uh, so Matthew had said UMG takes a very protective stance against YouTubers. Yeah, I just don't know much about that. Okay, then we got some comments from Wade and John Wayne, Matthew Stroud. Wade says suffering is pain that has surpassed the threshold of acceptance. This threshold seems to be falling as pain is overly avoided. Should pain not be embraced to a certain extent? Well, not as an end in itself, I don't think. I mean, pain can be good as a warning sign of you're in danger. Like if you feel pain after you put your hand on a hot stove, then you'll know not to do it again, or else you'll be even worse condition. Actually, Ayn Rand mentioned somewhere that there are some rare cases where children are born without the ability to experience pain, and that's very dangerous, right? Because then if some something very bad happens, like they're injured in some way and they just don't feel it, well then they might die much sooner because they're not getting these danger signals. Um, so there's a benefit to having pain, but only because it can help you get to a better state where you're not experiencing it and you're experiencing something positive, pleasure or enjoyment or happiness. So they both pleasure and pain have survival value. Um, Matthew says the whole thing may have to end up in court to settle what fair use really means. Maybe it does sometimes. Yeah, I've certainly had a few questions myself on what I can use, like what when it comes to photos and videos, for instance. Sometimes I put photos, but like I have a photo of Ayn Rand on my channel, and for a long time I didn't have any photos of her, but then I found one that it was in the public domain, um, and I think you see it commonly on the internet. So. Like the photo of her on Wikipedia is in the public domain, the lead photo at least, and that's the one I used on my channel. So that one, I don't think there's any copyright attached to it. So I think it was okay to use that one. But different photos might have different rules. Wade says life itself is valuable. Plants are primary producers. No plants, no us. Then he says to Matthew, I am a pirate, so I'm sure you can deduce my stance. You're a pirate? Oh, you're a my brain was on a different topic. You mean like you're an intellectual property thief? That's not good. I don't think it's good. I think intellectual property is important and should be respected, just like physical property should be respected. I'm going to Wayne's channel. I don't know if I visited Wayne's channel before. I don't see anything on it. No videos. It's just oh, it's a very new channel. June 13th of this year. It says Wade joined. That's only 8 days ago. Is this the same Wade? Hopefully this is not a alt account or some trolls trying to get around the block. But I remember seeing Wade. Maybe I'll have to look back later at the Wades I've seen and see if they're the same Wade or if they're some Wade impersonators. John says, or Peikoff, how values are just a certain type of fact. Yeah, there's a line in, is it Fact and Value, that article by Leonard Peikoff about how values are a species of fact, something like that. Then Wade says, good points. Fair use isn't that clear cut. Matthew says, fair use makes sense as an exception from copyright for societal reasons around free speech and criticism. What some YouTubers seem to forget is that the music is the actual property of someone, and that someone may not like you using it, especially for free. And Wade says to Matthew, they should use music from long dead people to be safe. Even there, I think there can be copyright issues, like if it's a certain recording, like say a Beethoven symphony or a Mozart, right? If there's a certain orchestra that performs a certain symphony on a certain occasion, I think that that might be copyrightable. So even though the composer is long dead, the people who performed that particular uh, instance of their composition, I think maybe they still have a right to it. And Matthew says, I saw some stuff this week that UMG are on the march, trying to monetize their property on social media. And then Wade says, I'm a fair pirate. My phone got stolen. Needed to make new accounts. Same Wade, new account. Okay. I think that's plausible because you seem similar to the Wade that I remember. I don't know what you mean by fair pirate, though. I think that might be a contradiction in terms. I don't know why you'd need to make a new account, though, because isn't your account tied to a certain email? Or maybe you need a phone number to create a YouTube account on YouTube. But even if that's, I don't know. I don't remember. It's been so long since I had to do that. But even if you do you have to get a new phone number? Is there a way to get your old phone number back? I don't know. Anyways, um, Matthew says this whole thing plays into the wider context of intellectual property and our use of it. And that's the last chat. Oh, we're up to 11 likes. Nice. It's good to see. I think that's what my last stream got total as of now. Sometimes I get additional likes after the stream. So to already be up to 11 during the stream, that's good to see. Thank you. Wade says, I lost my password and auto password screwed me. All right. All right. So says there are 9 people here. That's good to see. Should I keep going? Uh, maybe I should take another little break first. Like another hour has gone by. Sometimes but if there's still people here, then maybe it's worth continuing. Wade says intellectual development is a human achievement more than an individual achievement. Okay, now that sounds like it could be a false dichotomy. Like it's either a human achievement or an individual achievement. Individuals are humans, and humans are individuals. So couldn't it be both? Um, I mean, humans can build on each other's achievements. Like Isaac Newton said, I stand on the shoulders of giants, right? There were people before him, other scientists like Galileo and Kepler. Maybe it's he was standing on those giants' shoulders. And then people after Newton stood on his shoulders, right? Like Einstein. Could you have had an Einstein without a Newton? Maybe not. So there's definitely science is a venture that can beautifully build on itself. But these are all individuals involved. It's not an anonymous, collectivized achievement. There are particular individuals who made particular discoveries by using their own unique minds, and we know who they are, at least in many cases. I guess if you go far enough back in history, it could be anonymous. Like if you go back 3,000 years, who was the first person to uh, come up with a calendar or a year, the idea that the year took 365 days approximately, at least. I know the Greeks had a calendar that was, I think, that was approximately 365 days. I think the Egyptians also had a calendar that was about that time, but who the particular individual Egyptian was that first discovered this or the first Babylonian, I don't know. I don't know if anyone knows that. But that doesn't mean it wasn't some individual who discovered it. It still was some individual, and maybe multiple individuals discovered it independently. That's also possible. Um, but reason is an attribute of individuals, the individual mind. That's a point Ayn Rand makes. Just as there is no collective stomach uh, to digest your food, there's no collective brain to come up with your thoughts. So you can imitate others, you can parrot them and pretend like you know what you're talking about. You can repeat the words of someone else, but to actually understand what someone has said, um, and to go take it even further and build on it, you have to use your own individual minds. Reason is an attribute of the individual. Matthew says it's okay to think of it as building on others' work as long as you don't fall into the you didn't build that trap. Yeah, yeah. It's an achievement to build something, and individuals are the beings who build, and they can work together, they can cooperate, collaborate. Um, but at the root, it's individuals doing these things. And I think that's part of an individualist philosophy, which Ayn Rand holds, as opposed to a collectivist philosophy, where you take away credit from individuals. You say everything is just a product of the collective. But I think that's an injustice to the individuals who actually do achieve something. Wade says exactly stepping stones. I guess that's referring to the idea of Newton, Galileo, and then Newton, and then Einstein. I guess that sort of idea, that progression is the stepping stones. Any idea can spread to any mind, yet we are in an ocean of individual contributions. That's what Wade says. Yeah, I mean, there's that could be a good way to look at it. An ocean of individual contributions. Yeah, just never lose sight of the fact that the individual is the basis of value, or the unit of value. the thing that matters most. Like my life matters to me, and I interact with other individuals, like I'm interacting with you right now in the chat. Um, but it all comes back to me, and that's what matters most to me. And for you, it all comes back to you, right? Your life matters the most to you, or I think it should. And because things are values to you, then you have reason to engage with certain others. Like if it's a value to you, Wade said he enjoyed learning from me earlier in the chat. So it's a value to him to be here. If it wasn't a value to him, to his life, then I don't think it would make sense for him to be here. But if it is a value for him to be here, then I think it is good for him to be here. And if it's value for me to be here to engage with you, then it's a value for me. um, Dan, have you read Opar? Kutababa asks. Yes, I have. Multiple times. I first read it back in 1997 or 1998. And I think it might have been in that winter, the 97, 98 winter when I read that book. I first read Ayn Rand in 1997 in the summer. And then I started university in the fall. And then after the fall, during the winter break, I read some more of the nonfiction, including, I think that's when I first read Opar, Objectivism, the Philosophy of Ayn Rand by Leonard Peikoff. And then I read it again, I don't know what, maybe a few years later. And I also studied it at the Ayn Rand Institute when I was involved with their academics program called the Objectivist Academic Center, which was a multi-year program. And during the second year of the program, it was entirely devoted to studying that book. So I have spent a lot of time studying it. And then Kuda says, "Oh, good, me too." Do you want to say when you first read it? Uh, Wade says you don't have to, of course, but sometimes it's interesting to know, get a sense of um, how long people have been reading objectivist literature. Um, Wade says, us and I both are important. Yeah. And we're important to ourselves and to each other, potentially at least. Like your friends and your spouse can be important to you. Fundamentally, you're important to yourself. But by extension, other people can also be important to you. So if someone is providing you with some kind of value, then they can become important to you, but only because you first value yourself. If you didn't value yourself, then why would it matter that someone is giving you value, right? Unless you first valued you, right? So I think you are the fundamental, and then um, as a result of that, other people can also become values to you. Kutababa says, I read it when it came out, whenever that was, 91 or 93, around there. I read it 2 or 3 times. Okay. All right. Well, that's a while ago. Um, when it first came out in 1991. Yeah. So what's that? 34 years ago. So that was several years before I discovered objectivism in 1997. That's when I first read Ayn Rand. Philosophy Who Needs It was the first thing I read by her. I started with the nonfiction. Kuda Baba says, I see too many self-described objectivists who have not read it, who have not read Opar. And in my opinion, one cannot consider himself an objectivist without having read it. Well, I wouldn't agree with that. Ayn Rand didn't read Opar. Was she an objectivist? I mean, everyone before it was published. It certainly enhances your understanding of objectivism. I think it's a brilliant work. and makes all kinds of brilliant connections. What I think what's at least one thing that's amazing about the philosophy is that about the book is that it condenses the entire philosophy cover to cover in one book. Ayn Rand, she has speeches from different characters in different novels, and there's the nonfiction, but it's not all collected into one systematic treatment from existence exists, the fundamental axiom, all the way through uh, uh, metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, politics, aesthetics, all in one treatment, one treatment. So I think that's one of the big values of OPAR. You get that very synoptic overview, mountaintop perspective in a way that I think is difficult, if not impossible, to get from any other source. Um, and it's not objectivism because I think only Ayn Rand's her writings would constitute objectivism, but as Leonard Peikoff says in the foreword to his book, it's he identifies it as the statement of Ayn Rand's philosophy by her best heir and chosen students. Um, so I guess maybe it's the closest thing you can get to a single integrated um, presentation of her philosophy of the entire thing. And it was based on a course he gave in 1976 that she was present in called The Philosophy of Objectivism. Actually, that's what I was quoting from earlier when I was reading those comments from Leonard Peikoff on time and space. That was from his lectures course, The Philosophy of Objectivism in 1976, which Ayn Rand attended at least part of. And I think she participated in some of the Q&As that followed the lectures. And then so that book that lecture series was turned into the book that became OPAR in 1991. Um, John Wayne says Rourke didn't read OPAR. um, Kudababa says, I think you can call yourself a student of objectivism if you haven't read it, but you need that formal understanding, which Rand obviously had without having read it. Uh, well, there is a question there of when is it right to say I'm a student of objectivism and then leave out the student part and then just say I'm an objectivist. And people can give different answers to that. I haven't thought about that much myself, like where exactly would you draw the line? Um, so at least one possible answer here, which Kutababa is giving, is that you need some kind of formal understanding, which you can get from OPAR. So if you either need to get that from OPAR or in some other way, maybe by attending that course, for example, the 1976 course, maybe that would be an equivalent enough experience to uh, say you formally understand it. Um, and then Matthew Stroud says, as important as OPAR is, Peikoff's The Ominous Parallels is possibly more effective in advancing objectivism simply as a gateway drug for introducing ideas to a wide audience. Okay, so that's for anyone who doesn't know, that's another of Leonard Peikoff's books, The Ominous Parallels, which discusses the parallels between the United States and pre-Hitler Germany. So it was argued that just as there were certain ideas that led to the rise of the Nazis in the 1930s, some of those same ideas are also leading America in that sort of direction. Those are the ominous parallels. So that was what it was arguing. I read that book um, maybe around the same time as OPAR, maybe a little bit after. I don't remember exactly. But that's a great book. I mean, but yeah, I think all of his books are great. Now that one was actually endorsed by Ayn Rand. She wrote the introduction to it, to the Ominous Parallels. I think it came out shortly after she died, which was in 1982. And I don't know if it was published in 82 or 83, but I guess maybe it was just published in 82, but later in the year. She died in March 6th, I think, of 1982. So anyway, shortly after she died, but had already written the introduction to it, um, that book was published. And then many years later, it was like half of the book was republished under a different title called that The Cause of Hitler's Germany. I think that was the title. Um, maybe I should share that image on the screen. Just to concretize it a bit. New tab. Where is the I also want to show the ominous parallels. I'm going to put that into the search engine on Amazon. Yeah. Okay, here's both. I guess this is the original cover. Zoom. Share. There it is. So here's the ominous parallels with the American flag there and the Nazi symbol on top of it. Subtitle The End of Freedom in America. So that's by Leonard Peikoff. 1982, it says. So yeah, a few months after Ayn Rand died. And then later, part of this book, I guess the historical part. So there's a part on Germany and then a part on America. And I guess the part on Germany was excerpted and made into its own book because I guess they thought maybe they could sell more if they marketed it a little differently. So the part on Germany was republished some years later, and it was published as The Cause of Hitler's Germany. Oh, it says Introduction by Ayn Rand. So it still has the same introduction as The Ominous Parallels. Oh yeah, also says Ayn Rand there. All right, I'm gonna stop the screen share. Come back to the chat. All right, so we got some more likes. Thank you. Still got 9 viewers. Nice. And we just got a few more
new chats that came in? Okay. So I'm glad to see there are still people here, and I'm okay with continuing longer, but I do want to take a little break here. So I'm going to take another stream break and come back in a few minutes, and then I'll engage with some more of these chats. So see you soon. I am back. I know some streamers, they stream for many, many hours in a day. And then they just, I guess they have an editor that clips out some of the streams and publishes it as standalone videos later. I don't know if I'll do something like that, but maybe in the future. Okay, so what else do we have going on here in the chat? So Matthew had said about the ominous parallels. It's possibly more effective in advancing objectivism simply as a gateway drug. Her fiction is the primary gateway for most people, says Kutababa. Yeah, I think that's right. For me, I started with the nonfiction. I was most interested in that, but yeah, most people, I think they do start with the fiction. Wade asks, does the objectivism reject subjectivism? Sorry if that's a dumb question. I'm still learning. Oh, no problem. It does reject subjectivism, but what exactly subjectivism means, it's I guess there's different senses of the term. So there's a metaphysical sense of it, there's an epistemological sense of it, there's an ethical sense of it. So metaphysically, I don't think it's typically used this way, but well, I think if you have the idea that the subject creates existence, as opposed to there just being like an individual, like God creates the world, right? You might think of that as metaphysical subjectivism, just by an act of his consciousness. Let there be a world, let there be light, let there be creatures that inhabit it. The sort of thing you read in Genesis, the book of Genesis, which I was reading very recently. You might think of that as metaphysical subjectivism. Ayn Rand uses a term, the primacy of consciousness, which I think is getting at this sort of idea that consciousness is the most fundamental thing, and then existence is a product of consciousness, as opposed to just thinking existence exists independent of consciousness. Doesn't need to be created by consciousness, like God. If you take God to be some cosmic mind through an act of will can bring uh, the universe into being. Well, what about God? Who created God? Doesn't there already have to be does like it doesn't really make sense to say God created existence because that would imply God doesn't exist himself. Existence is everything. It is what is. So does God exist? Um, well, if he did exist, he couldn't have created existence because existence already would have been if God was there. Um, so I don't think as many religious people do. I don't think positing a God helps explain existence. I don't think you need to explain existence if that means explain why it exists rather than doesn't. It's just a brute fact, I think, that does not require an explanation. Um, Sometimes there are such things as invalid questions, and I think why does the universe exist might be one of them. But then there's other senses of subjectivism. There's epistemological subjectivism, um, where it's a claim about knowledge. of the world. You can't really know the way things are. You can only know things as perceived by a human mind. You can't know true reality. There's no absolute truth. There's only what's true for you and what's true for me, but there's no objective truth. So that's sort of subjectivism when it comes to claims about truth or knowledge. That's a different kind of subjectivism. And Ayn Rand would also reject that. Um, there is such a thing as objective knowledge, which doesn't mean knowledge independent of a mind, but it means there are facts of about the world which are true independent of any mind, and it's part of the task or goal of someone to grasp that independently existing reality or that independently existing fact. And you might be wrong about what you think is true, or you might be right. But there is a truth of the matter, like whether the earth is round, right? Maybe you think the earth is flat if you're living in a pre-scientific age, or maybe you think the earth rests on the back of a turtle, and that turtle rests on the back of another turtle, and it's turtles all the way down. I think this was one view some people held before the age of science, I guess. And you could be right about that, or you could be wrong about that. But you can't be both right and wrong, right? That would be a contradiction. Um, there is some way that the world is, and it's our task to grasp it. So the fact that people have different views doesn't mean that the world isn't a certain way. It just means people have different views about the world. And through logic, through evidence, through reasoning, you can establish which of the beliefs about the world are true beliefs about the world. And if you do have a true belief about the world, it's knowledge. Um, this is reminding me of the idea that knowledge is justified true belief, which I don't think is necessarily the right way to analyze knowledge. Um, I think it might be true that knowledge is justified true belief, but I don't know that that names the fundamental aspect of knowledge. I think in Ayn Rand's uh, work, she might just describe it as a grasp of the facts of reality. That's what knowledge is, as opposed to justified true belief, which comes from Plato. I think that's you see that formulation. Maybe I'll look up on the lexicon what she says later about knowledge. But anyways, that's all just to elaborate on the idea that objectivism would reject subjectivism in the epistemological sense, that is the sense having to do with knowledge. But then it also rejects ethical subjectivism, which is the idea that there is no objective view of right and wrong or good and bad. It's all just a matter of personal opinion. Um, Maybe you could also call this relativism. Um, Although maybe there's a distinction there between subjectivism and relativism. But I do think Ayn Rand would also reject uh, ethical subjectivism or ethical relativism. Um, I mean, good and bad are relative to an agent, right? So she says that to say something is a value presupposes an answer to the question of value to whom and for what. So, um, in a sense, you could say there's ethics are relative. They're relative to an agent. Like if I need to survive, I might say this banana is good for me. It's not just good in itself. It's relative to me that it's good. But I think there's another sense of relativism where which Ayn Rand would reject, which is that um, uh, it's arbitrary. Like there's no basis, uh, or maybe that's a better description of subjectivism, which she's rejecting. She doesn't think it's arbitrary to call something good or bad. Um, there is an objective fact of the matter, whether something is good or bad for you. But there's choices also involved. So if you choose to live, then certain things are good or bad for you. So there's an if-then structure or a hypothetical uh, structure as opposed to a categorical structure. In Kantian terminology, there's what's called the categorical imperative, which is contrasted with the hypothetical imperative. Hypothetical imperatives would say, if you want such and such, then you should do such and such. Like, if you want to live, then you should eat food and be honest and be productive. Um, but the categorical imperative doesn't, there is no if then. It's just be honest, period. End of story. There's no context. There's no if you want this. It's not relative to some goal that it's good to be honest or productive or to eat food. It's just out of context duty you have. Um, so that would be intrinsicism. That's another term which is less familiar, and Wade didn't use that, unsurprisingly, because it is a less familiar term. But this idea that things are just good in themselves apart from any relation to an agent or an agent's goals, you could call that intrinsicism. Whereas, subjectivism in ethics is just, it's good because I feel like it's good, or it's good because I want it. Um, but just because you happen to have a desire or a whim for something doesn't actually make it good for you. It could actually be bad for you. Um, if it's like a desire for food or sex, right? If you maybe you're in danger of getting a heart attack if you eat this cheesecake, and you have this desire for it, but just because you desire it doesn't mean it's good for you. It could actually be bad for you. Maybe you'll get a heart attack and die. So you have to think about something and its relation to your life as a whole in order to evaluate it objectively and decide whether it's good or bad for you. Whereas subjectivism might say, no, anything I want is good just because I want it. Um, all right. Um, in the chat, Kudababa says his first Rand read was Atlas. And then I remember waiting so long for Peikoff to finish writing Opar, and he kept pushing it back and back. It became kind of a running joke. I knew that was the case with the ominous parallels. I think he started it in the 60s, and he wanted to have it ready in time for the 1968 election so it could have some influence. Was that between McGovern and Nixon? Um, but it ended up coming out in 1982, so that's 14 years later. Part of it had come out in The Objectivist, the periodical by Ayn Rand in the 60s. But for the whole book, yeah, that had to wait a long time. And that I know that became a running joke. With Opar, I thought it was much more on a anticipated schedule, where it took about 6 years and it has 12 chapters, so it was on average 2 chapters per year. And uh, yeah, I think that one was pretty much as planned, if I recall what he said about it in one of his lecture courses. And Matthew Stroud says that's the abridged version on Hitler that Tick History read and introduced Rand to him. Okay, so yeah, he's referring to the book The Cause of Hitler's Germany, which Tick History, that's another YouTube channel, which I've seen some of. And he actually spoke at a Objectivist conference some months ago. And I think you can find that video on YouTube. And Wade says, so subjective experience is a chaotic variation on an objective external truth. Could you elaborate? Not sure I want to. LOL, says Kudababa. Okay, well, I talked about it for a while, so maybe that will suffice. You could also check out the Ayn Rand lexicon, Wade. I think that's a great resource um, on the ARI, the Ayn Rand Institute campus website. If you go to the lexicon, I'm sure you could find more about this concept, subjective or objective. The lexicon was also published as a separate site, not within the Ayn Rand Institute campus or courses site. They've rearranged it, but I think there's two versions of the lexicon online. I've been using the more recent version. It's the same content. It's just a different look and feel design. Um, Matthew says, perhaps we could say objective is a subset of subjective, where to be objective, there has to be a defined process by which we reach objective knowledge. I don't think I would put it as objective is a subset of subjective. Yeah, I wouldn't put it like that. I think they're opposed to each other. They're mutually exclusive viewpoints. Without the objectivity process, what is left of subjectivism is mystical. To whom and for what is a way of taking a floating abstraction form of morality and chaining it to concrete facts. So that's from Matthew. And Wade says, thank you for the answers, Dan and Matthew. Makes sense. You're welcome. Kudababa says, tick read Rand, tick history. It made him reflect on his life, and he promptly put his podcast on hold. Good for him. Yeah, I remember he said that. I guess he was thinking about egoism and what's really best for him, and he was spending a lot of time on his podcast and producing it, and I guess he experienced some kind of burnout, and I guess he was encouraged to take a step back and um, make sure he's doing what's best for him. I don't know if he's still taking his break. This was a while ago. This is like many weeks ago. I wonder if he's back producing content or or what. Hope he's doing whatever's best for him. That would be the right thing to do, I think. Okay. Um, no callers yet, but that's okay. I've had a lot to engage with in the chat, so thanks for participating in the chat. Oh, Kudababa says I checked just a few days ago and saw no new podcasts from him. Okay. So I guess he's still taking a break. All right, we're up to 13 likes. Nice. So I guess I'm benefiting by going longer today than usual. Getting more likes than usual. Maybe there's more people coming by. Welcome to the stream if you're just coming by. This is a bi-weekly show, or maybe a semi-weekly. I guess maybe bi-weekly is once every 2 weeks, but if it's twice a week, maybe that's semi-weekly. Yeah, anyways, I stream Wednesdays and Saturdays at 1 p.m. Pacific. So thanks for coming by. And thanks for watching later if you're hearing this after the live stream. I'm trying to advocate for Ayn Rand's philosophy of objectivism. So I discuss all kinds of issues from the perspective of her philosophy. I engage with people in chat. I take calls and trying to grow my channel. So if you haven't subscribed and you appreciate my content and the goal of my channel, then I definitely appreciate new subscribers. Let me take a look at my notes. I guess I could save some of this for a future show. Maybe that's what I'll do. All right, I think I'm going to end soon. It's been about 3 hours. So maybe I'll give you a minute, see if there are any burning topics or questions that come up in the chat. And if not, I think I'm going to end the stream. And I'll stream again on Wednesday. Oh, Kudababa and Wade just came in with some chats. Kudababa says, here's a topic for you to discuss next time if you care to. Should transsexuals be allowed to adopt children? Hmm. Okay. I haven't thought about that one. Maybe I'll think about it next time. You can also raise it next time. So if there's a topic that I don't remember to talk about, then you can just raise it again. I guess I'll add that to my list of notes. Maybe I'll think about it between then and now. Um, or maybe not. I might just think about it live on stream, and I'll give you my rough first draft thoughts. And then Wade says, so the evolution of the eye was probably a fuzzy image becoming clearer over millennia, kind of how subjectivism seeks an objective truth within the fallacies of thought. Okay. Looks like maybe that's another topic for next time. Maybe we can talk about that some if you want to raise it again. Um, and then Kudababa says, I thought you might want some time to think it over. Okay. I don't know if I'll think about it between now and the next show because I have a lot of other things to think about and other projects to work on. But maybe I can think about it during the show. As I mentioned, I can just kind of give you my off the top of my head thoughts. I mean, if it's something that I think is really important, maybe I'll decide I want to spend some time off stream thinking about it. Um, and I haven't really made a decision in this particular case whether this is one of those topics. At least right now, maybe it will be in the future, even if it's not now. But anyways, at the least, feel free to raise it again from scratch next time, and maybe I can discuss it some in the next show. Okay, Matthew Stroud just came in with the chat. He says, everything that any individual experiences is inescapably subjective. If we process objectively, it can become objective. I make a distinction between subjective and subjectivism. Okay. I think I kind of see what you're saying there. Like you might use subjective in a sense which is not a bad thing. Like in grammar, for example, there's so what's called the subjective case and the objective case. Like if I say I hit Joe or I punched Joe, I am the subject. I'm the one doing the action of the verb. I'm the one doing the punching. And Joe is the object. He's the one receiving the action of the verb. He's the one being punched. So subjective and objective there are value neutral terms. It's not like saying the person who's in the subjective position is good and the person who's in the objective, or sorry, it's not saying subjective is good or is bad and objective is good or vice versa. It's not making any claim about goodness or badness. It's just an issue of perspective, whether you are the one performing the action or receiving the action. And I think maybe something, at least in the ballpark of that sort of distinction, is the kind of distinction Matthew is articulating in this chat. So, um, yeah, I think there can be innocuous senses of the term. So it's just important to be clear in what sense you're using the term in a given context. And then Kudababa says, yes, you're using subjective in two different senses. Wade says, I might have used the wrong term, Matthew. Sure. Okay. All right. I'm going to end the stream now. So thank you again for everyone coming by. I appreciate the likes on the stream, either during now or afterwards if you're listening to this later. I appreciate any subscriptions and shares and comments. All right. Have a good rest of your day, everyone, and I will see you later. Bye bye.